What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're finally gonna react to NFL free agency. I'm not gonna lie, I've been giving it a couple extra days to see if my Eagles do literally anything, and then seeing that they signed Joe Flacco for double what he was getting paid with the New York Jets last year. I was like, all right, let's just get into these rankings, and this is gonna be like any high school presentation. I hope you're a little bit more interested than I was in high school, but it's gonna be like a slideshow, a PowerPoint. I wish I could use like the cheesy generic PowerPoint animations and clip art that I used to use in like elementary school. But I'll be ranking from 32 all the way up to number 1, in my opinion, the teams that have best handled and got better in NFL free agency here in 2021. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreements. I'm sure there's going to be lots of discussions to be had in the comment section below. It is just my opinion. This is not a known fact, but I hope you guys do enjoy, and I look forward to seeing how you guys agree or disagree with my rankings. Let's get into it. Number 32, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders got Yannick Ngakoue, 26 mil. I actually like that, but they got terrible decisions. Kenyon Drake, $11 million guaranteed. They got something known as an Andre James for $6 million guaranteed. They took a big cap hit to trade away Rodney Hudson for some reason, a top 3 center. No more Trent Brown, no more Nelson Aguilar. You got Richie Incognito back. They brought in Solomon Thomas and John Brown, but ultimately, you still look at the Raiders. They need a wide receiver. They still need pieces on the O-line at guard and tackle. They need a corner. They need a safety. I don't think there was a team that got worse in free agency in 2021 more so than the Raiders. Number 31, we have the Chicago Bears. I almost kind of just want to put Chicago here just because of the whole, Andy Dalton thing. I genuinely feel bad and almost frustrated for all Bears fans out there. But you look at what Chicago did in free agency. They tagged Allen Robinson, so that's about $18 million guaranteed. 4.5 guaranteed to Cairo Santos. 5.5 to Mario Edwards. 10 for Andy Dalton. They got Desmond Trufant at Toshu, not bad, but they also got rid of Kyle Fuller. Roy Robinson Harris went off, and so did Mitchell Trubisky. So ultimately this, for the Bears, it was like a free agency, but I'm more so putting them this low because I'm not even a Bears fan. I have no affiliation with the Bears, and I'm frustrated with their inability to get a quarterback. They still need a quarterback, a corner, and probably some safety help back there with Eddie Jackson. At number 30, we have the New Orleans Saints, and this is really no fault of their own. They just had the whole salary cap thing, and their window, they're all in on Drew Brees. This is the downfall of that. They lost Drew Brees, they lost Trey Hendrickson, Sheldon Rankins is gone, Jared Cook, Emmanuel Sanders, Janoris Jenkins, a lot of those veterans that they've kind of brought in to, win in a 1-2 year period. They were able to tag Marcus Williams. They paid Taysom Hill $12 million guaranteed, Jameis Winston at 5.5, James Hurst at 5. You look at the Saints roster. You just look at a roster, it's like, okay, unless something spectacular happens with Jameis Winston, it could be a rough year. I mean, they still have Sean Payton's one of the best coaches in the NFL. Don't really want to bet against him, but it's definitely the most shaky-looking Saints team that we've seen in quite some time. Still looking at them, they need a quarterback because I don't think they have the answer on the roster. They need a wide receiver, they need a linebacker, and they need help in the secondary at the cornerback spot. Get someone good on the outside that can play with Marshawn Lattimore. Number 29, another team that's kind of in a rebuild right now. I'm going with the Detroit Lions. You look at the Lions, they just lost so much for me to be like, I can't put them any higher, even though I think they've done some okay business, and you understand that they're in a rebuild, so you're not going to be, excessively harsh against them. But you look at Detroit, they lost Matt Stafford, lost Kenny Galladay, Justin Coleman, Desmond Trufant, and Matt Prater, who's one of the best kickers in the NFL. What they brought in, they got Jared Goff and 2 first-round picks, so more so the first-round picks are the important part of that dealing. Tyrell Williams re-signed Jack Fox. They got Romeo Okwara, $25 million guaranteed. Perriman, Jamal Williams, Michael Brockers for $11 million guaranteed. Some okay signings there, but it's a rebuild. You just can't not acknowledge the fact that if you're looking at a team that, in terms of talent, lost, maybe Detroit more so than anyone else, as they lost their franchise quarterback and their wide receiver 1. They now have, remaining needs at wide receiver. They could look at guard, defensive tackle, and still a big question mark at quarterback because Jared Goff is, Jared Goff. Number 28, I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons just, haven't really done much. They're kind of similar to my Philadelphia Eagles. But the reason why I had them this kind of low is because with them kind of committing to Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, it's like, okay, well, Arthur Smith wants to win and wants to compete. When you look at what they lost, they gave up on Keanu Neal, which, I'd say it'd be frustrating because he's one of those guys that if he can stay healthy, he's a really good safety. Now he's going to Dallas, he's moving to linebacker. I kind of feel like for the price, why not take that risk that he could stay healthy in Atlanta? But Alex Mack's a big one, man. If you are trying to not go all in a rebuild, you're keeping some of the old guys on offense, why not bring back a guy that's a legitimate top 5 center and let him walk? Very confusing. In terms of what they brought in, they got Mike Davis from the Panthers, $3 million guarantee, which is not bad. Young-Ho Koo, the fantasy football MVP for $1 million. A couple, Mingo, Eric Harris. They got something called a Matt Gano for $3.5 million guaranteed. I don't know what that is. So generally, it's like a mid. You lost Alex Mack. Why did you lose Alex Mack, Atlanta? Needs, they need a guard. I think they need defensive end, corner, and safety as we finish out free agency and enter the draft. 27, I've put the Green Bay Packers here. Green Bay, kind of suspect in terms of the way they've allocated their funds. They paid Aaron Jones $13 million guaranteed. They kept Robert Tonyan. I believe they tendered him or whatever, $3.5 million guaranteed. They gave Kevin King $6 million after the playoff game. I thought they'd be just, chomping at the bit to ship him to town. Then they lost one of the best centers in the NFL in Corey Linsley. They lost Jamal Williams, who was a healthy part of their running back rotation. It's not that big of a loss because they drafted A.J. Dillon. It's still a notable loss because he was productive for them. So ultimately, I just look at this as Green Bay as a team that's trying to get over the hump, and I see this sentiment amongst a lot of Green Bay Packer fans. Why pay Aaron Jones? And why did they pick Aaron Jones over Corey Linsley? That's ultimately why I'm kind of holding the Packers' feet over the fire here and putting them at 27. You look at the Green Bay Packers roster, still have needs at wide receiver, offensive guard, defensive end, inside linebacker, and getting another outside corner that can play oppose Jair Alexander. Can it be, Kevin King, maybe the dude from Iowa they had, Jackson, maybe, but I still think they'd probably want to add someone there. 26, I think this might be the first, not hot take, but first one that a lot of the fans will get upset. Number 26, I have the Tennessee Titans. And this is just purely from what they lost. They lost a lot. The dealings and players that they brought in have been fairly solid. Look at Tennessee. They got Bud Dupree, which he was unstoppable before he went down to injury. Sure, there's some risk. And is he going to be at that level that he finished at Pittsburgh with? But they gave him $35 million guaranteed. That's a big commitment. Denico Autry, $9 million guaranteed. They brought in Janoris Jenkins. They got Josh Reynolds. Really, really good deal bringing Jayon Brown back, $3 million guaranteed. But just looking at what they lost, man, Isaiah Wilson, so I'm going to kind of hold that against him for how bad of a first-round pick that was. That falls on the organization, especially the fact that they cut ties with him this offseason. Adoree Jackson's gone, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, and Desmond King. That is a lot of star power that has gone out the door for Tennessee, and they just quite simply haven't been able to replenish it. You look at the Titans, they need a wide receiver. They need help at tight end, offensive tackle, nose tackle, corner, and safety. Still, as we enter the later stages, the bargain bin days of free agency and the 2021 NFL Draft. Number 25, Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars have been spending a lot of money, but has it been, money well spent? The jury's still out. They got Shaquille Griffin, $29 million guaranteed. Rayshawn Jenkins, who I like, but absolutely not at $16 million guaranteed. They also got Roy Robertson Harris, $14 million guaranteed. Jamal Agnew, a special teamers, $4 million guaranteed. Marvin Jones, $9 million guaranteed. Malcolm Brown, almost $8 million guaranteed. Tyson Alualu was good business. He was really solid. Kind of weird that he was like a bust with the Jags. Went to Pittsburgh, got good. Now he's coming back to Jacksonville. That was good business. Sidney Jones. They gave Cam Robinson $13.5 for the 1 year, guaranteed for an average tackle at best. And then you kind of, they didn't really lose much. It's just more so I'm putting Jags here at 25 because I don't know if this was the best spending, the best allocation of the resources. Some of these contracts, for the most part, were pretty eyebrow raising. You look at Jacksonville, I still think they need help at guard, quarterback, which should be solved with the number 1 pick with Trevor Lawrence, tight end, and I think they still need to look at potentially adding a safety. For 24, we have the Houston Texans. Houston Texans 24. I guarantee people clicking this video thought I'd have them a little bit higher. Maybe even a little bit lower. They're kind of like the Patriots. They've been making just an absurd amount of moves here. Are they good? Are they bad? We will see. They got David Johnson, Justin Britt, Mark Ingram coming in, Shaq Lawson coming in from a trade with the Miami Dolphins. They got Marcus Cannon coming in from a trade from the New England Patriots, Christian Kirksey, Tyrod Taylor, Cam Johnson. They have two really good deals, though. They got Desmond King, $500,000 guaranteed. Philip Lindsay, only $1 million guaranteed. And both those guys, in the right scenario, can absolutely thrive, and that's a bargain for the Houston Texans. But you can't, you got to acknowledge, no more Bernardrick McKinney, starting linebacker. No more Nick Martin, their starting center. Will Fuller is gone, who, if, whatever happens with Deshaun Watson, obviously there's still a big pause when you're talking about Houston. But when you look at Houston last year, Will Fuller and Deshaun have an elite combination downfield when both of them are out there. Will Fuller obviously has had some injury issues, but that's still a big loss for them. And then J.J. Watt. They lost their best player in franchise history. So, they brought some guys in. They spent some money good, spent some money not so good, but they did also lose a lot of talent. Therefore, I'm going to have to put them here at 24 with still needs as we close out free agency in the draft at wide receiver, center, tight end, defensive back. I still think between the safeties and corners could use a couple more blue chippers, even though blue chippers are very difficult to acquire. And there's still the massive question about the quarterback spot. If they do trade Deshaun Watson or if they stay, and there's some legal issues and suspensions and all that stuff, it's just a mess for Houston, but I put him here at 24. 23 is my beloved Philadelphia Eagles. They've done barely anything, and I guess there is a degree of, let's reward Philly because they haven't given out any, I don't want to say haven't given out any bad, they haven't given out any, ridiculously bad contracts. That's kind of the benefit when you have no salary cap. But until they played Joe Flacco double what he was getting with the Jets. It's only $3.5 million. It's not, it's not like we paid a guy $15-20 million guaranteed and he's overrated. But still, for Philly's limited cap space, that Joe Flacco contract, pretty damn bad. But they got Anthony Harris for an absolute steal at only $5 million, which I'm very happy with that. But ultimately, when you look at this for the Philadelphia Eagles, there's no other way to be like, they lost Carson Wentz. They now do not have a lick of clue as to what's going on with the quarterback spot. Is it going to be Jalen Hurts? They said in the press release for Joe Flacco for competition. Are they going to get a quarterback at pick 6? Are they going to get a quarterback maybe in the second round? It's just more questions than answers. I guess we had to give another pause for Philadelphia. We're going to kind of phrase that conditional second from the Colts in that Carson Wentz trade as a potential conditional first as a positive for the Eagles. They also lost Jalen Mills and the punter Cam Johnson. Ultimately Philly falls here at 23 just because they haven't given out really bad contracts, haven't overspent for average players, and the Anthony Harris deal was really, really good. A lot of Viking fans still pretty upset about that. But ultimately, I can't put Philly really high. Can't be biased and put them higher than what they should be. They've done ultimately barely anything in this free agency period. And you look at Philly, their needs for the remainder of free agency as we go in the draft: wide receiver, quarterback, linebacker, corner, and safety. 22, I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks. You look at the Seahawks, some good business. I think Chris Carson at 5.5 guaranteed is good. They brought in Gerald Everett, Akila Witherspoon 4. They got Kerry Hyder, Gabe Jackson on the offensive line. That's an upgrade at guard in a trade that they acquired him from the Raiders. Poona Ford's not bad. Kerry Hyder, good rotational player. They lost Shaquille Griffin, a guy that I'm kind of surprised they let walk and didn't try to re-sign him. David Moore, who's a nice little weapon there for Russell Wilson as a wide receiver 3. Carlos Hyde is gone. It's just kind of in the mold of they lost some guy, the middle. We're now entering the tier of teams that neither did good or bad in free agency. They're kind of just in that little middle purgatory. And I think that is pretty much where Seattle is. You look at where Seattle still needs to get better. I still think at any point there's a BPA on the offensive line that's an upgrade. They should go after that. Defensive end and cornerback. 21, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens did really good business in some parts. This is just more so they didn't have the salary cap to retain. They lost a lot. That's kind of hurting their rating here a little bit because Baltimore got Kevin Zeitler, $16 million guaranteed, which is good business. Tyus Bowser at $12 million, and maybe a little too rich for my blood, but they got the tender there on Gus Edwards. It's only 3.5. He's very good rotational. 8.5 guaranteed for Derek Wolfe. Nick Boyle got a new contract, 10.5 guaranteed. Best blocking tight end in the NFL. But what they lost, man, they lost Mark Ingram, who they kind of phased out near the end, but it's still worth talking about. But ultimately, for me, it's the edge rushers. Matt Judon is gone, which I kind of agree with Baltimore with the demands that he was looking for money would also be too rich for me, but it's still, they're losing a starting productive edge rusher for them. And they also lost Yannick Ngakoue, who they, mid-season trade, unlikely they were going to re-sign him anyways, but still at this point, that is a lot of talent going out the door with, again, it's just more so positives and negatives. Did they break even? They're kind of breaking even, so that's why they're here in the 20s in that kind of middle range. Look at Baltimore's roster right now, which you finish up free agency in the draft. Need wide receiver, need an edge rusher, and still the biggest question is at that tackle spot. What is going to happen with Orlando Brown? Because if they do trade him, they're absolutely going to need to bring in another tackle that can play on the right-hand side. Number 20 is the Kansas City Chiefs, oddly enough. And this is the only team that I'm going to hold players that they've cut that have yet to sign anywhere as negatives for the squad. Because you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, there's just no way, because I don't think there's any chance these players are going to potentially come back. You know, Mitchell Schwartz at right tackle, Eric Fisher at left tackle. That is, you know, you just lost your 2 starting franchise tackles. And obviously, you know, a little bit of a difference. Eric Fisher is solid. Mitchell Schwartz, top of the position, top 5 right tackle in the NFL. There's some injury concerns there, but it's still a guy that they have to replace. And you look at what the Kansas City Chiefs have been able to do. I mean, they got Joe Thuney on $32.5 million guaranteed. Good business. Darrell Williams, Charvarius Ward, Kyle Long on a flyer. Probably overpaid a little bit for Mike Remmers, $3.5 guaranteed. But it's just, you know, what they lost. Mitchell Schwartz, Eric Fisher, Sammy Watkins. You're the Chiefs. You know, they could be a team that feast a little bit later on in free agency, get those guys that want to go there and try to chase the Super Bowl ring. But as it stands right now, as of the 24th of March, they're just kind of like, are they breaking even for what they've lost to what they brought in? Like Thuney was a big get, but other than that, I do feel like they're another team that's kind of just in that, like, you know, meh kind of tier for free agency this year. And you still look at the Chiefs roster, they need help at tackle, they need help at center. And I think bringing in another corner could help out the Kansas City Chiefs. 19, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers coming in here. Pittsburgh, they got Ben Roethlisberger back, $13 million guaranteed. They traded for Dwayne Haskins, Cam Sutton, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Juju's only getting $7 million guaranteed, so that's a very fair deal. Even though it's only on a 1 year, there's not a lot of long-term security there. Still, not bad for a player of Juju's caliber. But look at what they lost, man. They just cut Steven Nelson starting corner. They lost Matt Filer on the offensive line, who's underrated. Lost Mike Hilton, who's one of the best slot corners in the NFL. And they lost Bud Dupree, who was on a breakout year. Even though it was pretty much a foregone conclusion the Steelers weren't going to be able to pay him, I just think Pittsburgh here, they haven't really done bad business by any means in terms of what they've brought in. This rating here at 19 is more so of just what they've lost and the sad realities of the salary cap. So you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, I think they need a center. They still have, you know, probably should go after a quarterback sooner than later. Nose tackle, edge rusher, and cornerback. Yeah, those would be the spots I think if I was Pittsburgh, I'd be looking at free agency in the draft to try to prioritize that. Carolina Panthers are coming in at number 18 for me. Carolina, some weird contracts, some good contracts, and everything in between. You know, maybe this could be viewed as a little harsh. You know, Pat Elflein, $6 million guaranteed. Cam Irving, $8 million guaranteed. Don't really get those contract numbers, those points. They got Moton on the tag, 13.5. He's a good tackle for them. Hassan Riddick at only $6 million guaranteed, reuniting with Matt Rule, that Temple combination. That's outstanding value. That's one of the best contracts that was given out yet in free agency. They brought in Perryman, Dan Arnold, $4.5 million guaranteed. David Moore, Morgan Fox. They did some okay business. I think they overspent a little bit on the O-line. They lost Mike Davis, who was a great running back too. They lost Curtis Samuel, who was incredibly versatile for Joe Brady in that offense. But ultimately, you know, not a bad offseason for the Carolina Panthers. I feel 18 is fairly fair. And as we look at it, I mean, there's, you know, they are linked with the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, but we can't really talk about that right now until the legal matters off the field stuff settles. So you look at the Panthers roster, still need a quarterback. I think defensive tackle and then addressing the secondary at corner and safety is where they still need to improve before the next season starts. Next up, I have the Miami Dolphins at number 17. The Dolphins have been pretty busy. They got Jason Sanders, their really solid kicker, $7.5 guaranteed. They got Bernardrick McKinney in the trade with the Houston Texans where they sent away Shaq Lawson. They brought in Justin Coleman, Jacoby Brissett, $5 million guaranteed. Adam Butler, Will Fuller for almost $11 million guaranteed. I like that on the offense there, even though he's going to have a one-game suspension. Great deep threat for Tua Tagovailoa. You look at what they lost, though. Kyle Van Noy, very head-scratching about, you know, they brought him in as their big free agents last year, getting rid of him after 1 year. Kind of suspect. Shaq Lawson, as we mentioned in the trade for Bernardrick McKinney. Devon Godshow's gone, and no more Fitzmagic. Ted Karras at center has left. So it's just kind of a give and a take here for the Miami Dolphins. Lost a lot, gained some okay pieces. I feel like middle tier is where they belong. And as you look at the roster, I still think the Dolphins could go BPA on the offensive line. They need a playmaker, a game changer at running back, an outside linebacker, and I think they could use a little bit more depth at the safety position. Minnesota Vikings are coming in at number 16. I think the Vikings did okay. You know, Dalvin Tomlinson for about 21 mil guaranteed. Pat Pete, 8 mil guaranteed. They gave 2.5 to Rashad Hill. But obviously, I think Dalvin Tomlinson, that's a big get. That is a big need that needed to be addressed for the Minnesota Vikings, the center of that defensive line. They did lose a couple veterans, Kyle Rudolph, Anthony Harris, Riley Reif. Those guys were all starters, and they weren't really able to replace those starters. And for a lot of them, the replacement wasn't behind them on the depth chart either. That kind of created more holes for the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm putting them kind of a little bit higher at 16 because I do think Dalvin Tomlinson was an absolute home run given their needs, and I do kind of enjoy the sentiment that most Viking fans are upset that they lost Anthony Harris, so it makes me feel a little bit better about the Philadelphia Eagles front office that we actually just gave a decent contract, and we can't maybe always focus on the shitty Joe Flacco type contract with Philly. But ultimately, yeah, Minnesota at 16 is fairly good. You look at the roster, still think they could use a wide receiver 3, go BPA on the offensive line, either at tackle or guard. Depends on how they really want to use Ezra Cleveland. I still think you can use another defensive tackle, you can use another defensive end, and get Anthony Harris's replacement at safety. Dallas Cowboys are coming in at number 15. Dallas started by giving Dak Prescott his big contract. I think it's deserved. I'm not overly worried as an Eagle fan. I don't think Dak Prescott's going to lead them to a bunch of Super Bowls, but they absolutely had to do right by him given the injury, giving him $126 million guaranteed. That's about the price he should have went for. They tendered Cedric Wilson, Antoine Woods. They brought back Jordan Lewis on about 8 mil guaranteed. Keanu Neal kind of prove it on 3 mil guaranteed, reuniting with Dan Quinn. They paid some okay money for Terrell Basham as well. They did lose some guys. They lost the great Andy Dalton. They lost Cam Irving, who actually got paid, I don't know, we talked about with the Panthers. I think that was a little too much. But the biggest loss is Chidobe Awuzie at corner. I know the Dallas secondary hasn't been great, but I've always been a fan of Awuzie ever since he came out of Colorado. And Dallas still has more questions than answers when it comes to that cornerback spot. But, mid-tier for Dallas, paying big money for Dak. It's one of those things that's going to be polarizing. If you think Dak's going to be a franchise elite quarterback and bring in the Super Bowl, you're probably going to have him higher than 15. But if you think of Dak Prescott, it is what it is. They kind of get stuck between a rock and a hard place having to pay him. Are they ever going to be amazing with Dak? And you kind of feel like I do. It's like, yeah, they're going to move the ball well, but Dak Prescott doesn't necessarily strike fear in the rest of the NFC for the remainder of that contract. You're going to put him at 15, like literally dead middle of the park. Wasn't a bad free agency period. Wasn't a great free agency period. Kind of trending towards good, I suppose, for Dallas, but we'll toss him here and keep him at 15. Looking at the roster, still need help at center, even though Bidaj, maybe there's some ceiling there. Didn't look particularly great last year. I think they could also use help at defensive end and cornerback. The Cleveland Browns next at number 14. This is a roster, though. I think the Browns, they were kind of good. Not going to say surprisingly good, but they played to their talent level last year, and they made the playoffs. I think the Browns are they're going to go as far as Baker Mayfield can bring them because they don't have a lot of holes. They brought in John Johnson, 24 mil guaranteed. Troy Hill, 4.5. Anthony Walker, Malik Jackson, bringing back Rashard Higgins. They got Tack McKinley going out the door. Terrence Mitchell, Kendall Lamb, like kind of depth guys. They did lose Larry Ogunjobi, which is a considerable loss on the defensive line, and they're probably going to have to replace that in the draft sooner than later with a high draft pick. But you look at the Cleveland Browns, and I just see, they didn't obviously break the bank. They didn't get a whole lot of all-star talent. I don't know if they necessarily got a lot of guys that puts them over the edge, but John Johnson's a very good safety. Now you can pair him with Grant Delpit. You got Ronnie Harrison there. I do think the Browns are going to be pretty damn good. You still look at the Browns roster. I think they could go defensive line, linebacker, and corner. They should go defensive heavy in the 2021 NFL draft, but I think the Browns are going to be pretty damn good next season. 13, I'm going with the LA Chargers. Chargers spent good money. I think they spent very good money. Corey Linsley, 26 mil guaranteed. Matt Fiedler, 14.5 guaranteed. Jared Cook, that kind of has like a one-year Band-Aid to replace Hunter Henry, 4.5 mil guaranteed. That was really, really good business here from the Chargers. The downside, they lost Hunter Henry, Rayshawn Jenkins, Dan Feeney, Denzel Perriman. They cut Trey Turner. Maybe there's a chance he comes back. But I do think improving the offensive line, protecting Justin Herbert is S-tier priority for the Chargers, and they've done a fairly good job at doing that. You still look at their roster, still need help at tackle. I think they need to replace Perriman at linebacker, need help at corner. They got rid of Casey Hayward, trying to get a little bit younger there. but ultimately the Chargers are looking pretty good, and they did what they had to do in free agency, and that is get better on the offensive line. So I'm going to put them here at 13. Number 12. Every time I put a team in the NFC is higher than Philly, it makes me feel bad. But I'm going with the Washington football team at number 12. And I'll tell you right now that this is probably the one that I've shuffled around the list. I almost feel like it should be higher, but I don't. I'll explain why it's not going to be higher, though, once we go through this. So looking at Washington, they got Heineke. They brought him back. They did right by him. But ultimately, Ryan Fitzpatrick on $6 million guaranteed. He's going to be their quarterback for this year. They got William Jackson, which is good, 26 mil, maybe a little expensive for 26 mil guaranteed, given the fact that his play has dropped off with the Bengals over the last couple of years, but he's still a damn fine corner. They got Curtis Samuel, still waiting to see what the guaranteed money is on that. They got Brandon Schrift, 18 mil guaranteed. They did lose Ronald Darby. They did cut ties with Dwayne Haskins, and that's ultimately why I have Washington here at 12, is because even though they got Fitzpatrick, even though I do think they're going to be the favorites in the NFC East this year, they have no solution at quarterback right now. And unless somehow Mac Jones or something like that slips to him in the draft, free agency is about addressing your biggest needs when you can. And I still just feel like out of all the teams, the tiebreaker that kind of pushes Washington down a little bit and outside of the top 10 is that quarterback was the biggest question for them going out. And yes, they did a good job getting a one-year Band-Aid, but, you still need your franchise quarterback. They didn't address it. They couldn't really address it. It's maybe not their fault that I have them here at 12, because that long-term franchise quarterback wasn't really available to them. But I'm going to punish them for the Dwayne Haskins. They cut ties, so that ultimately was a bad pick there. And, hey, I'll still give you this one. If you're upset where I have Washington, you're a Washington fan, I still think you're winning the NFC East, so enjoy that. Looking at the roster, though, I still think they need another wide receiver to pair with Scary Terry and Curtis Samuel. Because they got, some other good role players that could step up. But, you always could use another blue chip, another guy that's a bona fide outside playmaker. I think tackle is a spot, guard, quarterback, and linebacker for Washington as they finish out the free agency and get ready for the draft. Number 11, we're going with the Indianapolis Colts, who made the big splash of trading a second round and conditional first, potentially, which hopefully it is for me as an Eagle fan, for Carson Wentz, a man reuniting with Frank Reich, which a lot of Colt fans hope that he can become the new franchise quarterback. They brought back Xavier Rhodes, $6.5 million guaranteed. Marlon Mack, only $2 million guaranteed. They put the tender there on Zach Pascal and Mo Alley Cox, so that's good gets for some stability on the offensive side of the ball. What they lost, potentially conditional first, Jacoby Brissett, Danico Autry, and Anthony Walker. So it's one of those things where if Wentz wasn't coming off a terrible year, it would probably be higher, because anytime you can land a franchise quarterback, a guy that could take you over that edge, over that hump, and get you to the next level, that got to be up there. But the fact that there's still more questions than answers, unfortunately, for Carson Wentz, I'm putting the Colts here at 11, even though they have definitely not had a bad offseason. I don't think they've had a bad offseason since they've had Chris Ballard as their general manager. You look at the Colts roster, they still have a massive need at left tackle. I still think you could look at another playmaker at wide receiver and replacing Anthony Walker at linebacker 3. And to start the top 10, at number 10, I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals. I like the Bengals, what they've done so far. They got Trey Henderson at $16 million guaranteed. I guess the long-term comparison will be who's going to be better long-term, Trey Hendrickson or Carl Lawson, who they let walk. But I do like Trey Hendrickson there at 16. They got Mike Hilton, one of the best slots, $6 million guaranteed. That's a great contract. Chidobe Awuzie, $7.5 million guaranteed. Just going all in to repair that secondary. They got Riley Reef, who's kind of inconsistent, but had a strong year last year with the Minnesota Vikings. They got him $5.5 million guaranteed, and it makes it so they don't have to hit on Penei Sewell in the draft. They have a little bit of a Band-Aid. Larry Ogunjobi, I think that's solid defensive tackle pickup, and under $5 million guaranteed for him. They just added Quentin Spain at guard. So they're improving the offensive line. They've done very well. They lost A.J. Green and John Ross at wide receiver. I mean, those aren't massive losses by any means. Carl Lawson is the big one. I think William Jackson kind of stings a little bit. But ultimately, I do think the Bengals have got a lot better than they got worse. They got younger. They improved the O-line. Good business so far for the Bengals. A healthy Joe Burrow, since he could be one to watch next year. It'd be really interesting to see who they hit on at pick 5. Or maybe they trade back. Who knows? In the 2021 NFL Draft. But I'm looking at the Bengals. I still think guard, tackle, center, just continue to get better on the offensive line. Is where I would go with the NFL Draft. Number 9, I'm going with the Denver Broncos. You like secondary? You want to improve your secondary? Look no more further than the Denver Broncos. Where they brought in Ronald Darby, $19.5 million guaranteed. He's inconsistent, but when he's on, he's on. He's really good. I can say that as an Eagle fan who's probably wasn't in the best scheme with Jim Schwartz here in Philly, but he was solid with Washington. They got Kyle Fuller, $9 million guaranteed, reuniting with Vic Fangio. They re-signed Justin Simmons, $35 million guaranteed. They got A.J. Johnson, Tim Patrick, Shelby Harris at $15 million guaranteed. Kareem Jackson's back at $5 million guaranteed. Brought back Brandon McManus. He's a solid kicker. In terms of loss, Philip Lindsay, that's I felt like they might have did right by him because, it's mean that they only got $1 million guaranteed from the Houston Texans. They probably could have paid that, but they maybe wanted him to go elsewhere and rock and roll with Melvin Gordon. They also lost Jeremiah Toshu. Had a solid year. Solid rotational edge rusher for them. But ultimately, Denver, very good job. All in on the secondary. If they can figure out the quarterback spot, Denver's going to be, I think, a sleeper team in the AFC next season. So you look at the roster, though, I still think Denver needs help at tackle. Get a right tackle there. Quarterback is the glaring need for sure. And I also think getting a nose tackle on the defensive side of the ball is where they should look at when it comes to the remainder of free agency in the upcoming draft. Number 8, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills. I think the Bills have done a good job of not losing their key players and retaining their guys, so I'm going to kind of reward them for that. They got Emmanuel Sanders, about $6 million guaranteed. That's an upgrade at wide receiver. They got Mac Hack, solid punter. Mitchell Trubisky at only $2 million guaranteed. Sure, very low risk QB2. Matt Milano, who would have been probably the top linebacker available in this free agency period, re-signed him $23.5 million guaranteed. Darrell Williams got picked up, $13 million guaranteed on the offensive line. John Feliciano, solid guard, that's about $4.5 million guaranteed. Micah Hyde got a new contract, $13.5 million guaranteed. All good money, keeping them very competitive next season, going for another run. I like all the moves the Buffalo Bills have done. They lost some guys for sure, John Brown, Brian Winters, Andre Roberts, but those aren't any significant losses, especially at wide receiver. You can replace that with Emmanuel Sanders. I really do think Buffalo just one of the most underrated, well-run franchises. You don't really hear Buffalo getting mentioned a lot when you talk about some of the top front offices. I think it's about time we start showing them respect. But looking at where they need to get better, I still think they can bring probably someone else to try to find that proper partner next to Ed Oliver at defensive tackle. And I would like to see them get another outside corner to play on the other side of Trey White. We're already half hour in. Well, we're almost done. At number 7, I'm going with the team that spent the most money in free agency. Some good contracts, some head-scratching contracts, and that's the New England Patriots. Let's go through it. Give me a second here. Let me catch my breath. So the Patriots, we'll go with what they lost first. They lost Joe Thuney, Adam Butler, and Marcus Cannon in a trade. So they lost Joe Thuney's probably the biggest loss of all that. But the Patriots, when you talk about big loss on the offensive line, it's, the Patriots are like the most polarizing organization because you see a good player with the Patriots, and it seems like more often than not, they're not good when they leave New England. So we're going to have to wait and see. But looking at what they did bring in, they brought back Cam Newton, $3.5 million guaranteed. I still think there's a massive question mark at quarterback for them. But Matt Judon, $32 million guaranteed as an edge rusher. Jonnu Smith, $31 million guaranteed. Hunter Henry, $25 million guaranteed. They tendered J.C. Jackson, only a second rounder. I wouldn't be surprised if some team kind of challenges the Patriots for that. But I also think there's enough people being like, all right, if we really give a second up for J.C. Jackson, what are the odds he's not going to look nearly as good in our scheme as he does with Bill Belichick? That's a very legitimate argument. They traded for Trent Brown back from the Raiders. They got Kyle Van Noy, $6 million guaranteed. David Andrews, $6.5 million guaranteed. Jalen Mills, $9 million guaranteed. Devon Godchaux, $9 million guaranteed. Kendrick Bourne, $5 million guaranteed. Nelson Aguilar, $16 million guaranteed. So there's a lot of good spending like Judon, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Kyle Van Noy, and I think getting J.C. Jackson and Trent Brown back as well as the bargain deal for David Andrews. But Jalen Mills is expensive. Nelson Aguilar is not a great contract. But still, they definitely got better. I think point being, they definitely got better. So I'm going to put them here at number 7. You still look at the Patriots roster, though. I still think they have a massive question mark at that quarterback spot. They don't really still have a bona fide wide receiver 1. And I do think on the defensive side, they're still looking for a true legitimate nose tackle there to anchor the middle of the defense as they close up free agency and probably more so enter the draft. Number 6, probably the second biggest spending team, is going to be the New York Giants. I have the Giants at 6, just outside of the top 5 because, I'll explain it in just one second. That's not me being a Salt Eagle fan because Giants had very good offseason in terms of bringing in players. They re-signed Leonard Williams, $45 million guarantee. I like keeping Leonard Williams there. Think maybe there could be some argument that that's too much money for what he really offers on the defensive side, but he was really good last season. They got Kenny Golladay, $40 million guaranteed. Adoree Jackson, $26.5 million guaranteed. They also got some flyers, John Ross, Kyle Rudolph. So I look at this and I see Kenny Golladay and Adoree Jackson, the number 2 and number 3 in terms of their guaranteed money, and both those guys have struggled to stay healthy. So anytime you pay big time money like that, guaranteed for players who are talented when they're on the field, but they do have major injury concerns, it doesn't make it an absolute home run of a signing. And you look at what they lost, man. Kevin Zeitler and Dallin Thompson are two impactful players, one on offense, one on defense, that they're now going to have to try their best to replace those. So ultimately, they've landed some of the splash names for sure. Doria Jackson, Kenny Galladay, which is good business. There's a reason why they're at number 6. But it wasn't like an absolute flawless free agency period here from the Giants, as they have given out some risky contracts, and they did lose 2 really good players. So you look at the roster for the Giants, I'm thinking, I mean, they got questions all over. To finish out their roster, to be a complete legitimate contender. I still think they need help at guard, need help at center, quarterback. What's going on there? I assume they're going to give Daniel Jones one more type prove-it year, edge rusher, and I think inside linebacker are spots they can go. More and more, I'm thinking that the Giants might just be able to get Micah Parsons in the 2021 NFL Draft, and that's going to be pretty annoying as a Philadelphia Eagle fan. We're now into the top 5. Let's go. At number 5, I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, yes, they did pay an absurd amount of money for a fullback, but they're probably the only team that a fullback is that important, giving $10 million guaranteed to Kyle Juszczyk. The other contracts, though, man, for a team that, like, if you could just not think about Jimmy Garoppolo, you're like, all these moves are moves to, like, get them back to the Super Bowl. They got Trent Williams back, $40 million guaranteed. They got Alex Mack at only $5 million guaranteed. He's a guy that still can play like a top 5 center. Samson Ebukam from the Rams at $5 million. DJ Jones, Jeff Wilson, Emmanuel Mosley, Jaquiski Tart. As we mentioned, Kyle Juszczyk, one of the best contracts, getting Jason Verrett, who finally stayed healthy and had a breakout year last year. $4.5 million guaranteed for a guy that's easily going to be their corner 1 next season. Unreal business. Absolutely unreal business from the San Francisco 49ers. They did lose some guys. Kendrick Bourne, Solomon Thomas, Akila Witherspoon. Looks like obviously Richard Sherman is another guy you can pencil in that most likely won't be returning. But ultimately the 49ers, I mean, hey, hell of a job there. John Lynch is slowly becoming one of the better general managers in the NFL. Still in the Niners roster, though, I still think they could use another wide receiver to pair with Ayuk and Debo. Could use a guard, safety, corner. And I'm just going to put a question mark at that quarterback spot for San Francisco. At number 4, staying in the NFC West, I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals splashed with J.J. Watt. It was really the first big move of free agency, giving him $23 million guaranteed. They get A.J. Green at $6 million guaranteed. It's a big name, but, if you've watched A.J. Green over the last couple of years, expectations aren't really that high. They brought back Marcus Golden. They brought in Matt Prater. Probably their best move, though, was trading for Rodney Hudson. They got a bona fide top 3 center in the NFL. Bargain of a price, which is very important for that offensive line, because you look at the offensive line for the Cardinals, easily one of the units that they definitely needs the most TLC to improve and get them to a respectable level. They did lose Hassan Riddick, which is got to be kind of frustrating, the fact that he finally had a breakout year, finally lived up to a first-round billing, and then you just let him go for really not that much money. Dan Arnold's gone. Pat Pete, it ends there. Kenyon Drake is left. They did lose some guys, but I think ultimately the J.J. Watt, getting Marcus Golden for the price point, and Rodney Hudson are very, very elite moves there from the Arizona Cardinals. So therefore, I'm going to put them at 4. Still looking at the roster, though. I think they need help at guard and at tackle. Still could look for a legitimate running back, even though Edmonds is not bad. They don't have that franchise RB1. I think a nose tackle could help, as well as replacing Patrick Peterson in the secondary. And finishing up in the West, Rams at number 3. I'm going with the Rams at number 3, and here's why. My justification makes a lot of sense. You look at what they brought in, you look at what they lost. They lost a lot, right? They lost Gerald Everett, Morgan Fox, Troy Hill, Samson Ebukam, John Johnson, Michael Brockers, Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks. Paid a lot. But in terms of what they brought in, and we're not really going to throw shade at Deshaun Jackson. Congrats, you got Deshaun Jackson. But they tendered Darius Williams, who was really, really good last season, and it looks like a really good 1-2 punch with Jalen Ramsey. They paid Leonard Floyd. Maybe that's a tough one. $32.5 million for Leonard Floyd is not the best contract. It's not brutal, but the biggest reason why I have the Rams here at 3 is they got Matt Stafford. They have made easily, I think, the most impactful free agency move to get them back to another Super Bowl, more so than any other team in the NFL. So even though they have gross losses, that there's just no way they were able to pay these guys given their disrespect for the salary cap, the fact that I still think the single most important move so far has been the Rams getting Matt Stafford. That is why they are here at number 3, and that is why mainly they're there at number 3. They have done the biggest move to try and get them to the Super Bowl, more so than any other team in the NFL. I'm going to reward that. I'm going to put them here at number 3. Still to the roster, I think they need a center, a guard, inside linebacker, touch up the O-line a little bit, get someone that can anchor and man that middle of the defense. But ultimately, not a lot of holes to fill for the Rams. They should be very competitive. I mean, the NFC West is going to be an absolute bloodbath next season. But in number 2, and this pains me because we let the guy responsible for a lot of decisions just walk because our general manager, Howie Roseman, he's not even our general manager, he's the EVP of player personnel. He's such an egomaniac, he wouldn't add and create a general manager position to give to Joe Douglas. So at number 2, I'm going with Joe Douglas and the New York Jets. What? The Jets at number 2, I just think they've hit home runs. They haven't hit necessarily home runs for players. They got some risk plays, but I think all the contracts they've given out have been very good. They got Carl Lawson, $30 million guaranteed. Tag Marcus May, that's $10 million. Corey Davis, only one hit wonder, potentially finally put together with Tennessee, was wide receiver 1 when he was coming out of Western Michigan. So if you're hoping that it wasn't like he finally became comfortable with Tennessee, but he finally became comfortable in the NFL. And what we saw last year with Tennessee is the new Corey Davis. And getting him only $27 million guaranteed is exceptional value. But I mean, there's still a little bit of risk there for sure that he kind of regresses a little bit, remains inconsistent. But I think that's a gamble definitely worth taking for the Jets. Jarrett Davis and Sheldon Rankins, former first-round pick from the New Orleans Saints. Keelan Cole, LaMarcus Joyner. In terms of what they lost, not a whole lot, man. They're not going to be losing sleep over Henry Anderson, Jordan Jenkins, Brashad Perriman, Pat Elflein walking out the building. So I think the Jets coming at number 2 because of what they brought in versus what they've lost is incredibly one-sided to the talent that they've been able to bring in. And usually when you see bad teams spending a lot of money in free agency, we've seen it a lot over the last decade. I don't want to just throw the Jags under the bus, but we've seen it a lot with the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of that stuff doesn't come back. A lot of times they overpaid. And I'm looking at the Jets. I don't see one single overpay for any of the free agents that they were able to attract. So exceptional job done for Joe Douglas. But still plenty of holes to be filled. Looking at the Jets, I think guard, I think right tackle, tight end, running back, quarterback, and corner are still spots that they should try to address in the remaining free agents or in the 2021 NFL Draft. And finishing it out with number 1, we're going with the Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who else? I mean, I don't think you could, in a good conscience, put anyone else at number 1. They won the Super Bowl, and what have they done since then? Lost absolutely nobody officially yet. Like no one that they've... Andrew Adams to the Eagles. They're going to be losing sleep over that. But they got Levante David, $20 million guaranteed. They tagged Godwin, that's about $16 million. Re-signed Tom Brady, $25 million guaranteed. Got Gronk back, $8 million guaranteed. Shaq Barrett, $34 million guaranteed. Ryan Suckup, $6 million guaranteed. Ndamukong Suh, $9 million guaranteed. Only contract I think is a little suspect for me is Donovan Smith, which they just gave out $30 million guaranteed for, in my opinion, an average at best left tackle. I thought that was a spot maybe they want to try to improve in free agency or in the draft. And you look at Tampa, like where do they still need? I think they maybe bring in another running back. I don't know if you want to gamble with what they have right there. Ronald Jones has been hot and cold throughout his career. They got the guy from Vandy there entering his second year. I still think maybe someone else at running back, more of a game changer, could be good. Defensive end on that front 3 as well. Maybe look to try to improve and upgrade over William Golson. But ultimately, yeah, Tampa, man, oh, Jesus. The Tom Brady effect is real. And for my money, no one's had a better free agency and offseason so far than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So 42 minutes in. Thank God and thank you, anybody that's gone this far. But I definitely want to hear what you guys feel about your favorite team, or maybe if you just have a disagreement over some of my rankings, some of my grades, let me know in the comment section below. As always, your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. I will say we are very close. I've been strictly and solely posting my draft rankings, positional rankings, like top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 running backs, stuff like that, on my Patreon for the last month and a half. We're just about ready to finish the defensive players that are going to be posted on the Patreon. But starting in April, I am going to be carrying over a lot of that information. Not all of it, because obviously I want to reward the people that have been supporting my Patreon. We're at actually almost at 100 total Patreons, which is absurd to me that many people want to support me. But there will be draft content in terms of rankings and stuff coming to YouTube. It just won't be as much as what we had on my Patreon. So if you do and are intrigued by my Patreon, it's a great way to support the channel, and you get some added kickbacks if you like my opinion and takes on football players. But that is it. That is my plug. And that is how I'm going to end this video. Thank you guys for watching. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.